So today I'm going to show you some techniques to use with the liquid tempera paints. The liquid tempera paint's a little different from the watercolor that we use in the pans because it's wet, which is why it's called liquid tempera. It comes in these containers, it's on the shelf. Notice that all the lids are labeled with the colors. Make sure you get the lid on the right color. You're going to need paint. You are going to need paintbrushes. You're going to need water and a paper towel. You also might need, if you're mixing colors, either a paper plate or one of these little palettes. Start with talking about some brushes. I've been using these brushes for watercolor because they're really good because they're soft. They work for the tempera paint. But we can also use these larger brushes that are a bit more wiry and not as soft. These are not good for watercolor paint, but they work really well for tempera paint. So we're going to start with a dry brush technique, and I'm just going to dip my brush into the paint so that I have paint on one side of my brush but not on the other side. And then I'm going to start painting with this paint on top, and this is our dry brush technique. So you can see it gives you a little texture and you can paint pretty quickly that way, and it dries pretty fast. The next one is the underpainting. So I'm going to just get some more paint on my brush, and I'm not actually painting this right now, I'm just laying down some color. So I'm just assigning a color to this spot. A lot of people think that this is how you paint, but this is actually just laying the base color down. And we're gonna wait a little bit till that dries, and then we'll paint on top of it. Another thing we can do is we can just press the paintbrush onto the paper. So I'll get paint on my brush and I'll just press it. I press it flat. I get these big kind of shapes. I can also get more paint and do it on the side of the brush. Gives me a little smaller shape. You can also press and pull a little bit to get longer shapes. So you can get a bunch of interesting shapes just by pressing your brush onto your paper. We can also do what's called an edge or a cut-in. So if you have a drawing and you want it a clean edge for it, you'll go ahead and load up your brush with paint, and you're going to paint just right next to the line, and you're pulling your paintbrush. So you just kind of pull the paint up against that line. And then once you get a clean line, then you can go back and pull this extra paint over to the side. And that's how you can get a nice clean edge. We can also do some blending. I've got a little bit, let's see, get a little, I already have some red on my brush, and then I'm going to get a little bit, whoops, I don't want to stick that into the yellow because that might contaminate my yellow. So first I'm going to wash off my brush, and I'm going to clean it off with a paper towel. You can kind of squeeze the water out of it a little bit. Make sure all that red's out of it before I stick it in my yellow. And then I'm going to go ahead and use a paint palette. You can use a paint palette or a paper plate, but just scoop up some of the color you need. I'm going to scoop up some yellow in there, and then I'm going to wipe off my brush some more and kind of get the water out. And then I'm going to scoop up some red in here. So now I have a little bit of red on my brush, and I'm just going to dip it into the yellow, and I just dip it on the edge of the yellow because I don't want to mix all the yellow up just yet. I might need it again. And then you can pull it like so that it blends this way, kind of almost like a value scale. And then I can always go back and get some red and make it darker this way. So that's how you blend. You can also use a double loaded brush technique, and that's another thing that you would need to scoop your paint out for in another palette. And I'm just going to get some red on one side and some yellow on the other side, and just kind of tap it on my paper. The trick to this is you don't want to tap it too much or you will start to lose your yellow. You can even, you wanted to lay down red first and then go back in here and get some yellow. Do the yellow on top this way. I'm going to go ahead and get some yellow paint, and you can just paint right on top of this underpainting. You notice it kind of gives a different effect than if I was to just put yellow right on my paper. The yellow's a little brighter by itself, but if you put it on top of the red, it kind of mixes in with the red and gives you kind of almost an orangey color. So those are some techniques that you can use with the tempera paint. When you're done with the tempera paint, you're going to make sure to put the lids on the correct color. And you have to snap them a little bit to make sure that they don't dry out. And then the paint palette that you were using, if you use one of these plastic ones, it's going to go in the sink to be washed. If you used a paper plate like this to mix colors, and this can go in the trash. And the paint brushes, of course, go in the sink to be washed, and you just dump out your water. And that's how you use the tempera paint.